Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us. My name is Tim Wheaton with the MMA Sucka podcast, joined as always the wrestling heavy dominant grappler to my plucky striker, Frazer Krohn. How are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate. How are you?
Oh, hanging out, just thinking about UFC 272. I think perpetually we're always talking about what is the best style for MMA. And I feel like there may be exceptions to the rule, but it's got to be top position wrestling. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think that was in multiple fights at UFC 272 that was on offer. We've got the obviously the main event, Colby pretty badly dominating Jorge Masvidal over 5 rounds. We then had Rafael dos Anjos, who again dominated, yes, late notice opponent in Renato Moicano, but it is what it is. It's still, he managed to take him down and dominate him on top position. Bryce Mitchell was able to get Edson Barboza down to the floor and dominate him for the best part of 2.5 rounds, 2 rounds. Sergey Spivak, which we all like to see, dominated Greg Hardy by just sort of being able to take him down and manhandle the much bigger guy. And then, even further down the card, we had Marina Rodriguez, who obviously locked in the submission against Agapova. Again, using topside wrestling. Like you say, I think it's probably the most important aspect, unless you've got, one of the best takedown defenses in the game and you can mix that with your wrestling. The wrestling game is all important, is all, it's omnipotent almost, because there's no way to stop it. You can stop a good striker by taking him down. You can't stop a good wrestler if you can't defend the takedown. So I think that's and that was especially evident in the main event.
Yeah, I mean, we get into big talk sometimes, but we try to figure out for centuries what the coolest martial art is. Is it kicky? Is it punchy? I mean, wrestling's the oldest one of them all. It turns out if you put a guy on his back, he can't do anything to you. That's maybe the best martial art. But yeah, we saw an absolute dominant performance from wrestling. Jorge Masvidal was frustrated after the fight, saying if you could go back in time, I would learn some wrestling. We've heard Dustin Poirier say the same in the past as well. And Colby Covington, after this fight, called out maybe Dustin Poirier. Who knows what's next for the winner of Colby Covington? But and not a lot of people calling him out. He's a tough style matchup for a lot of people. But yeah, this fight ended up being pretty much exactly what it looked like on paper. The guy who can put on a pace beats the guy who struggles a little bit with pace. The guy who doesn't counter wrestle too well struggled against the wrestler. What did you think of the main event fight? Was it even worth a main event?
I think it was worth the main event. For me, it wasn't fight of the night. I think Jalen Turner was Jamie Mulliker. He was fight of the night, although only went just over 2 rounds. That first round was phenomenal. Or Ludwig Klein versus Devontae Smith. I thought that was a really, really good fight as well. Or RDA versus Renato Moicano. I think there was better options for the fight of the night, personally. But no, I think it was definitely main event worthy, just because it's a huge name. You've got Jorge Masvidal, a huge name. Both men coming off losses to the champion Kamaru Usman. But what I would say is, I'd echo everything that you said, is that at the end of the day, that fight went exactly how people like us in the industry thought that fight was going to go.
Yeah.
Jorge Masvidal has notoriously struggled with pace. He didn't, even at the end of the Nate Diaz fight, he looked to be almost fading towards the end of the Nate Diaz fight, and he was almost lucky in a way that fight was stopped. Not prematurely, but stopped before the 5 rounds, because we know Nate Diaz will go for 45 minutes, not just 25 minutes. So, and especially with the kind of fight that it was, that wrestling heavy style from Colby Covington is clearly paid dividends. And if you're not used to a wrestling style, Jorge Masvidal can spend the 12 weeks of camp wrestling day in, day out, but it's a different type of cardio for someone like Colby who's been wrestling his whole life. So yeah, I think, like I say, I think it went how people like us in the industry thought it would go. The much stronger wrestler beat the striker, but Colby's striking isn't bad. Yes, he was dropped in I think it was the 4th round, but Jorge just didn't have anything left to follow up. And usually we'd see Jorge almost jump on Colby or jump on an opponent when he's got them hurt, and he just didn't seem to have anything left, even in the 4th round, which is I'm not really sure what his game plan was. He said it was just to break Colby's face. Now, that's not a game plan. We know that's not a game plan. But what is interesting is, I thought, the fact that he couldn't even follow up in the midway through the fourth round to jump on a clearly wounded, he dropped Colby. It was a huge strike, and you've got to ask, is Jorge Masvidal a 5-round fighter? The answer so far would be no. He's the past 4 fights that he's had have all been obviously, or 5 fights. No, 4 fights that he's had have all been 5-round, scheduled for 5 rounds. Only one of them has gone 5 rounds, and it was on short notice, and he wasn't really having to be made to work because Kamaru Usman just dominated him. He got knocked out by Kamaru Usman, obviously, and then he got the doctor's stoppage against Nate Diaz. In my opinion, he's not a 5-round fighter, but he's certainly an entertaining fighter.
Well, I'm looking at scanning the record. He hasn't won any 5-round fights in his career against Gilbert Melendez, against Benson Henderson. It's nice with Jorge Masvidal, because often fighters were just trying to figure out a couple of things that they do well and then extrapolate from there. We have so much footage on Jorge Masvidal going back a whole decade. This guy fought so much. He fought in long fights, but keep in mind, like, he's not a 5-round fighter. He's never won a 5-round decision. He's barely won 3-round decisions. Remember that he was the guy who just barely eked by 3-round decisions. He kept losing split decision losses to people because he was really happy to, in his mind, it was like he was landing just one more punch than my opponent. So I'm just going to go on. I'm just going to take a second because I'm ahead on points. Like, that's not quite how the fight works. So he was losing a bunch of decisions in a row. I don't think managing cardio is a tough thing to do. And I don't think he's learned how to do that. He's just learned how to be better at the things that he was doing well, like his body kick, setting up for his straight left, stuff like that. He learned how to do that really well in his last, half a dozen fights or so. He's gotten a lot better over time by focusing on those things. But no, cardio was never the thing. Whereas Colby Covington is the antithesis in that he has weaponized cardio. Exactly. And I know that's a term from the, I think Luke Thomas said that, weaponized cardio and weaponized aggression. This guy was shutting down Robbie Lawler on the feet. He even putting a pace on Rafael dos Anjos. Like, this guy's insane. Like, he's a tough fight for anybody. And honestly, at the end of the day, it just makes Kamaru Usman look that much better that he was able to beat him that well, right?
Exactly. Just how good is Kamaru Usman that he pretty much dominated him in the second fight. And the first fight, yes, he got the finish and it was late on, but that was a close fight. And for Kamaru Usman to, I don't want to say be able to hang with Colby, because it sort of does Kamaru Usman out of the just how good Kamaru Usman is, but he was able to hang with Colby, and he was able to go shot for shot with Colby. Now with Jorge, it's difficult because if you look down his record, he's 3-5 in his last 8.
Yeah,
he lost to Damian Maia. He lost to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, dominated by Thompson, was dropped a couple of times, I believe, by Thompson.
Yeah.
Then he took all that time off. And I don't want to take anything away from his 3 wins, but the Darren Till win was at welterweight. Darren Till was boiling himself down to be a welterweight, and he never should have been able to make that weight physically. He's too big. We've seen him now at middleweight. He's a big middleweight, let alone a big welterweight.
And I hate to do this, but because I hate when people bring this up, but like the guy who lost that fight was winning the fight until he lost.
For sure, was winning. He dropped Jorge in the first couple of minutes, of the fight. Then the Ben Askren flying knee.
Cool.
Phenomenal, brilliant. Great game plan. He believed that he could get back to his feet if Askren took him down. But I am now wondering, with the wrestling that we've seen against Usman and Colby, if he hadn't landed the flying knee, would Ben Askren have just taken him down and dominated him? And then the Nate Diaz fight, it's a doctor's stoppage, which, it's a doctor's stoppage that was earned by Jorge Masvidal, don't get me wrong, and he was winning the fight. But is Nate Diaz an elite competitor at 170?
No.
Again, no. He's a huge superstar. He's not an elite competitor. And then, he gets thrown into the Kamaru Usman fight on late notice. He gets the rematch with Kamaru Usman and gets badly knocked out. And now he's lost to Colby Covington. for Jorge, I don't really know what's next unless it's Conor. You know, I don't see any. There's no other big names out there that Jorge can face in and around his own weight class. You know, Conor is the only big name out there. There's no great pull, I don't think, to see a Nate Diaz rematch. I know Jorge sort of took swipes at him this week in Fight Week, or last week, I should say. Outside of that, you know, he's never going to be a competitor for the title. You know, he doesn't beat Kamaru Usman, he doesn't beat Colby Covington. The Leon Edwards fight is a potential, depending on how Leon Edwards' fight with Kamaru Usman goes. Jorge Masvidal will now sit out until at least the end of this year.
Yeah.
So, and we know Usman and Edwards are facing off in probably be International Fight Week in July. So,
that's a fun one. That's a good one there, and that's
for sure, exactly. And you know, depending on how that one goes, if Edwards loses that one, that's the fight to make the Jorge Masvidal versus Leon Edwards 5-round co-main event, I'd imagine, later on in the year. It's too big for a fight night, but it's not big enough to headline a card. So I think a 5-round co-main event like we had with RDA and Moicano this weekend. And you know, if he loses that, I think it's time that we sort of called it on Jorge Masvidal's career.
We've been calling him a journeyman since we started doing this show like 10 weeks ago, or no, longer than that. I think we're like 12, 13 weeks deep now, but we've always kind of called him like he's a really good journeyman whose losses don't indicate how bad he is, but his wins don't indicate how good he is either. You know what I mean? Like he's almost was able to be a little bit better, overachieve what he should have been able to do, but his losses don't really speak for how bad he is, because those were all close losses. Even the Benson Henderson loss was, you know, close, stuff like that. Yeah. So MMA on Point had up who's next for Jorge Masvidal, and like you said, it's just nothing sticks out. So they said Stephen Thompson too. No, who cares? Stephen Thompson beat him. That's it. Or the loser of Luque versus Bilal Muhammad. Okay, that's not bad, but I don't think that's.
With the greatest respect to Bilal Muhammad, I don't think he's a big enough name to face Jorge Masvidal. I don't think Masvidal is in this business anymore to try and become a champion. Jorge's in it for the money fights now. He knows in his heart of hearts, he knows he's not beating Kamaru Usman and he's not beating Colby Covington. No. And the Leon Edwards fight is going to be a tough fight for him. So I think, you know, a Stephen Thompson, a Bilal Muhammad, a Vicente Luque, these are all guys, if you want to try and get back to a title shot. I think I personally, I think he's more than happy to accept, you know, I'm not a title material. The Tendre, I think he's 36, 30, 37. He's not title material, unfortunately for Jorge Masvidal fans. He's not. And, you know, I think it's about time that, you know, the Conor fight or the Leon Edwards fight for me are what's next. And I don't see the Conor fight happening because if Conor's advisors have got any sense, I wouldn't take that fight. You know, if he's dropping Colby Covington, he's got a phenomenal chin and is a natural welterweight, you can drop Conor at welterweight unless that happens at a catch rate of 160, 165. But Dana White won't do that, I don't think.
No, that's a really good point, dude, because Conor doesn't necessarily have the obvious strengths that play into Jorge Masvidal's obvious weaknesses of being put on the back foot, really being pressured with great aggression, pace, stuff like that, top position wrestling. Conor doesn't do that. He's a counter striker. This could be a very boring matchup. You know? Sure. No one's going to look good coming out of it, most likely, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the hype, the build up to the fight, without a doubt, will be fun. You know, these are two guys that are not scared to sort of trash talk each other, as it were, and you know, they'll take swipes at each other on social media, and it's, you know, the fight makes a lot of sense. Jorge 0-3 in his last 3, Conor 0-2 in his last 2. Yeah. If you look at the wins at welterweight that Conor's got, Donald Cerrone, who's a lightweight, Nate Diaz, who's a lightweight.
Yes,
never actually fought a welterweight. You know, and then if you look at Jorge Masvidal's wins, Darren Till is a middleweight and he's fighting a lightweight. Ben Askren always been a welterweight.
Yeah.
And then Nate Diaz, you know, is what it is as far as him being a lightweight coming up to. Sorry, Nate Diaz being a lightweight coming up to welterweight, but we can almost cross that one out because Connor's done the same thing.
Mm.
He's been in there with Lorenz Larkin, huge welterweight at the time. Benson Henderson in and around the weight class, Ross Pearson in and around the weight class, Jake Ellenberger in and around the weight class. But Damian Maia, he got a split decision loss. But Damian Maia is a fully he's fought for the middleweight title against Anderson Silva in Abu Dhabi. He's a big guy.
Yeah.
Stephen Thompson never making 155, and yes, he lost fairly convincingly against Thompson, but he wasn't knocked out by Stephen Thompson. Kamaru Usman in their first fight wasn't knocked out, and Kamaru Usman can easily fight at middleweight. He's a huge guy.
Yeah,
I think Jorge would just be too big for Conor, but it's the kind of thing that Conor would do, and I'm here for it, to be honest. Conor, he always likes to take the risk, as it were, to test himself, and rightfully so. I'm here for it, but I just don't think that that's a great fight for Conor McGregor, especially coming off the knockout loss and the sort of injury loss, as it were, against Dustin.
Yeah, I don't want this to be the Conor McGregor show because it's so easy for every podcast to just be like, what do we do with Conor McGregor every week? We got to save that for when we have absolutely no news going on and just be like, who's next for Conor? And we'll pick for sure. We'll pick some absolute scrub. I don't know, Renato Moicano. No, he's so good. He's so good. But this co-main event, it didn't really ever make sense, did it? This is again like a guy who can be as big as a welterweight sometimes, a former champion at lightweight versus a featherweight. It was just a style matchup for RDA all day. This was such a layup for him.
Yeah, for sure. I think they were just trying to do RDA solid by keeping him on the card. Obviously they had to cancel his main event or reschedule his main event a few weeks ago against Fiziev.
Yeah, that's
due to visa issues, I believe it was. That's why we got the Johnny Walker, Jamahal Hill fight. Then obviously we learned, I think, Tuesday, because I recorded the podcast last Monday. Tuesday, we learned that Fiziev, or one of Fiziev's corner, had tested positive for COVID. And I said, well, Moicano, it's not a bad, on paper, it's not a bad replacement. He's coming off he's moved up to like you say. I think he could easily be a featherweight again, but obviously he's moved up to lightweight for the past couple of years. But he lost to Rafael Fiziev by devastating KO.
That's
and
true.
Now you put him in against RDA. But, he was coming off the victory against Jai Herbert. And then, obviously, just a couple of weeks ago, the victory against Alexander Hernandez, which was, it's a good win. But Hernandez isn't RDA. And it was, like we said, RDA just dominated the fight. And I think, what I would say is phenomenal refereeing by Mark Goddard to say, look, I'm giving you 30 more seconds. Show me something. And I think Mark Goddard wanted to stop the fight, but the doctor said that he was happy for him to continue. Yeah,
Mark Goddard is one of the best in the biz. Really a big fan of Mark Goddard. His work with the amateur MMA scene in Europe. He's making a difference here. I do want to say on Moicano that this might not be. Sometimes you get a loss and it benefits your career because you learn something about yourself. You learn what your flaws were. I don't think this loss helps Moicano at all. I think this just hurt the guy. I think this probably shortened his career. Doesn't bode well for the guy. I think we probably did damage.
I do agree to it. I do agree to a degree, but at the same time, it's the first time he's ever been scheduled for 5 rounds, taking it on 4 or 5 days' notice. He went all 5 rounds. Yes, he wasn't competitive for the 5 rounds, but he was winning some of the exchanges against a guy who was preparing for a striker. He certainly needs to work on his takedown defense. But at the same time, Moicano's been in the UFC now since I had no idea he's been in the UFC since 2014.
2014, yeah.
2014, and he still seems to be like on the come up. But
yeah, that's true.
He's never actually won a fight by knockout in his entire career. He's got 16 career wins, 9 by submission, 7 by decision. Which, that's surprising for me because he was cracking RDA.
Yeah.
And for me, there's no call to see Moicano. I hope Moicano got some sort of extra little sort of envelope from Dana White, because he made that co-main event what it is. RDA, like we saw in the fifth round, turned it into a sparring match. He could have finished, without a doubt, he could have finished Moicano.
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt. I think, any more shots to that eye of Moicano, he crumbles. But what heart shown by Moicano, what does it do for RDA? Nothing really. It just increases his paycheck a little bit. I still think the Fiziev fight is the one to make at lightweight, because RDA doesn't gain anything from that win. If you look at the rankings, RDA, I don't think they've been updated, but I can't see. Maybe he'll jump one ahead of Michael Chandler, but Moicano wasn't a ranked guy at lightweight.
Yeah,
it's difficult for RDA, because he wanted to. He'd gone through all the training camp. He wanted to stay on the card, and rightfully so. I'm not. Fair play to RDA, because he was willing to take on any comers, as it were. But does he get the Islam Makhachev fight off the back of that? I don't think that's the fight to make. I think that the Rafael Fiziev fight is now the fight to make again. Try and rebook that for a third time. And Islam Makhachev versus Beneil Dariush for me, or Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier, if Poirier decides to stick around at 155. But there's nothing that says to me that the 155 fight between Fiziev and RDA shouldn't happen, and it should happen over 5 rounds. Fiziev, depending on how ill he was with COVID, is ready to go. So whether he takes a fight sooner rather than later at lightweight, and then the two meet a little bit further down the line when RDA recovers a little bit from, it's a 5-round war. Yes, he dominated it, but he took some heavy shots. You could see his face at the post-fight presser. He was marked up, RDA. Yeah. So I can see these two fighting October, November time, and I can see Fiziev getting out before the turn of the year, and twice, once maybe May, June, July time, and then against RDA in a Fight Night main event like it was scheduled for first time round.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct with what they're trying to do with these matchups. It sounds like, based on what Dana White says, they're going to rebook Makhachev versus Dariush, which is a fun little fight. That's a good scrap right there. I still think Makhachev's styles, that's a pretty good fight for him. But I think RDA versus the other Rafael. Oh man, that's a banger of a fight. That's such a good fight. That was better than the main event fight until it was canceled for me. I love that.
For sure, yeah, for sure, without a doubt. And it's just styles make fights, and RDA can stand and bang if he wants to. And we saw in the first sort of 3.5 rounds of this one, he can snatch your leg and take you down, and just do enough, like we see with Colby Covington, just do enough to not get separated, which I think is really important in, as we were talking about earlier, the top game sort of the world of top game pressure. You need to just always be constantly doing enough to just keep on top of your opponent, keep on working away at your opponent.
Yep.
And consequently, get the win, as we've seen with the top 3 fights on this card. Colby did enough from the top position to dominate Jorge Masvidal. RDA did enough to get 4 rounds up, and then he almost didn't feel the need to take Moicano down in the 5th.
Yeah.
And now go on to Bryce Mitchell's fight, 30-25, 30-26, 30-27.
This is the worst loss. Edson Barboza's had some bad losses, and this is one of the worst we've seen in terms of getting entirely roasted.
He started off well with the leg kicks, eat up the leg of Bryce Mitchell, why not? And then it just, outside of the first 20 seconds, 30 seconds, it was all downhill. The loss to Khabib at UFC 219 was a bad one for Barboza, but guys didn't really give Barboza much of a chance. Styles make fights, and Barboza has always struggled with the sort of wrestling game.
Yeah.
And Khabib, I don't think we even need to say that Khabib is the elite wrestler in the division. So that one was almost to be expected. 30-25 against a guy like Bryce Mitchell. No offense to Mitchell, but Edson Barboza has been in there with some of the best in the world. He's been in there with Khabib, been in there with Kevin Lee over 5 rounds, been in there with Dan. He's finished Dan Hooker. He's finished Shane Burgos. He's tough guy. He's been in there with Cerrone, Paul Felder, Tony Ferguson, Pettis, Melendez, Dariush, and then more recently, since dropped down to featherweight, Dan Ige obviously picked up the loss.
Yeah.
TKO'd by Giga Chikadze, and now absolutely dominated by Bryce Mitchell. I don't know where Barboza goes from here. He's obviously still around. He'll still be in and around the rankings, but he'll drop obviously below Bryce Mitchell. We've got Sadiq Youssef versus Alex Caceres this weekend. If a big win for any of them could nudge Barboza up and out,
Either of those are a fun little scrap. But do you think I know he was looking at free agency not long ago. He's got 3 wins in his last 10 fights. Some of those losses were close. Some of those wins were close. Well, what do we actually do with a guy like this? He's not going to challenge for even the top 5 position. He's not going to drop out of the top 15. He's just in that mid zone where it feels like anyone can game plan for him. Now we know exactly where the weaknesses are, and you need to follow the textbook. You need to follow someone else's game plan. What do you actually do with this guy at this point? If you were in his corner, you were his manager, are you keeping him in the UFC? He would be a staple at a Bellator. He'd be a staple at PFL. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And it's difficult because, he was obviously struggling at lightweight, knocked out by Justin Gaethje. That fun fight with Paul Felder, dropped down to featherweight and lost his debut against Dan Ige. But in his last 2 fights, he's faced 2 completely different opponents. Giga Chikadze is going to look to stand and kickbox with you, and he was knocked out by him in the 3rd round. I think he's in the 3rd round, 2nd or 3rd round.
Yeah.
And then he prepares for the wrestler against Bryce Mitchell, and it was dominated by him. So that's 2 styles of 2 guys that are fringe. Bryce Mitchell sort of at the moment he's fringe top 10, and Giga Chikadze's fringe top 5. That's 2 styles where he's been badly outmatched. And like you say, PFL I think would be perfect for Edson Barboza. You've got free agency. I think for a lot of people is the way to go, especially for someone like Giga Chikadze. And I'm just looking down the 2021 season roster for PFL. I know obviously we've 2022, but it is what it is. Fun fight: Bobby Moffett, Brendan Loughnane, Bubba Jenkins, Lance Palmer, Shane Moraes, Tyler Diamond. These are all guys that, especially from the UK point of view, I want to see Brendan Loughnane versus Edson Barboza. Yeah. I think that's a phenomenal fight, and if he chooses to stay at featherweight, if he goes up to lightweight again, you got the Anthony Pettis rematch that sells for me. You got Marcin Held, Clay Collard, Oliver Aubin Mercier. There's plenty of fights for Edson Barboza in the PFL, and that's just if he gets matched up with these guys. Then you look at Bellator, and you've got, I think he's top 3 in Bellator,
right? And
you've got a lot. In my opinion, you've got a lot of more favourable matchups for Edson Barboza at lightweight. You look at the guys that have just fought for the title. Patricky Pitbull, stand-up guy, but can wrestle, against Peter Queally. Peter Queally will look to wrestle you. Benson Henderson's in there, who will look to stand and bang with you. Brett Primus, wrestler, so it's not maybe the best that we've got style matchup with him. Sidney Outlaw, very well rounded, but at the end of the day, Edson Barboza's the competition that Edson Barboza's faced is across his career is far better than far better than the competition that these guys at the top of Bellator will have faced, and it's a shame for Barboza because he's got that style where we will always tune in to watch him.
Yes.
Just looking down his record: fight of the night against Burgos, fight of the night against Gaethje, performance of the night against Ayush, fight of the night against Ferguson, fight of the night against Felder, fight of the night against Danny Castillo, knockout of the night and fight of the night against Terry Edson, fight of the night. I mean, he got 4 post-fight bonuses in his first 4 fights. You got two post-fight, but knockout of the night and fight of the night against Terry Edson back in when was that? 2012.
2012 when they first, I think, yeah. And Terry Edom was one of those guys I picked to be like, that's a future champion right there. Not even close.
Sure, exactly. And he's got 8 fight of the nights, 1 performance of the night, 1 knockout of the night, so performance of the night. He's got the tied most fight of the nights in UFC history with Nate Diaz and Frankie Edgar. The guy is all money.
Yeah.
But he's just not. If he's more than happy to just come in, collect a paycheck and head out, by all means. But he took a lot of damage. He's taken a lot of damage in these. And, Bryce Mitchell is not. This beatdown wasn't just like a lay and pray beatdown. It wasn't just Bryce Mitchell on top, just doing enough to stay on top, like we mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Bryce Mitchell was hurting Edson Barboza with the strikes from the top.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to see that from Edson Barboza. He's 36 now and he bores himself down to 145. I think if it was me, if I was Edson Barboza or Edson Barboza's team, I'd say PFL lightweight. Don't cut unnecessary weight. You've already beaten Anthony Pettis. Don't cut any more weight. Go to the PFL or or Bellator, but compete at lightweight. Don't featherweight isn't doing. He's not the bigger guy at featherweight against a Bryce Mitchell, against a Danny Gate, against a Giga Chikadze. He's not been the bigger guy, or the stronger guy, I should say. He's been the bigger guy, but not the stronger guy. Yeah. So going down to featherweight hasn't really benefited him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely co-sign with you that there's not much left for him at this point. Like anyone you put him up with, I still probably couldn't pick him, even if it's a complete style layup. Alex Caceres, like what, you're gonna split decision loss to Alex Caceres now? This is a slide in your career. So yeah, I would say move out there. However, yeah, Bryce Mitchell gonna crack into the top 10. Some really good matchups looking ahead for him. I would argue that upcoming at UFC on the UFC London card, there's Arnold Allen fighting Dan Hooker at featherweight. I would say Bryce Mitchell fights the winner of that fight. But what do you think? Is there someone else? Maybe the Giga Chad? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's depending on who wins. I think Dan Hooker probably gets a little bigger of a push than Arnold Allen if that was to.
Oh yeah, that's
if he is to win. Arnold Allen, he's a big name in the UK, but outside of the UK, despite his undefeated run, he's not the biggest name in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The featherweight division is slowly but surely sort of sorting itself out, isn't it? We've got Volkanovski versus Chan Sung Jung is UFC 273, the next pay-per-view.
Sure.
Max Holloway is sort of sat on the outside at the moment with the injury, but was scheduled to be fighting Volk.
Yep.
We've got rumors of Yair Rodriguez and Brian Ortega.
That's a banger.
Calvin Kattar's coming off for sure. I love that fight. It's styles make fights, and both men need to bounce back after disappointing losses.
Yep.
But we've got Calvin Kattar is sat out at the moment after that beatdown of Giga Chikadze to kick the year off. Josh Emmett is still in and around there. And then, like you say, Arnold Allen's facing the unranked guy in Dan Hooker. But, Dan Hooker doesn't need to be ranked at featherweight for us to know that he's a killer.
Yes.
And then, then you break into the Edson Barbozas, Dan Ige of this world. I think Dan Ige has a fight coming up. I seem to remember...
you're probably right.
I seem to remember reading something about Dan Ige having a fight coming up.
As a bit of a road warrior.
So Movsar Evelev versus Dan Ige in June. That's a phenomenal fight.
Yeah.
But what do you do with Bryce Mitchell then? I think Giga Chikadze. I think Josh Emmett is ever so slightly he's on a little bit of a winning streak where he wouldn't take the Bryce Mitchell fight. He's on these 4 fight winning streak at the moment, 2 finishes, 2 decisions against Burgos, and last time out against Dan Ige. If I was Josh Emmett, I don't take that fight because that's a risky fight for me to take. With that being said, I don't, unless he gets a Calvin Kattar, I think Josh Emmett probably takes that Bryce Mitchell fight because he takes the scalp of an undefeated fighter. But what I have found weird is that Bryce Mitchell's going down, they say he's 15 or 14-1. He's actually undefeated in his professional career. He only lost on the Ultimate Fighter. So I don't really know. That's just a little caveat of thing I I clocked onto. I don't really get that, but it is what it is. It's not too important for it to work out. But it's just, it's a strange thing. If I was Bryce Mitchell, I feel a little hard done by, to be honest, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, featherweight's a super fun division. Like, there's not a lot of bad matchups. A lot of these guys are booked, but I mean, there's not a lot of bad matchups in that division. What you do next with him, I don't know. As a person, I have trouble kind of talking about him because he seems like a person that I wouldn't like as a human being. So as a fighter, whatever. Let's just get him knocked out and get him out of here as fast as possible.
Yeah, that's what I feel, especially after his interview with Ariel this week. But then, his post-fight interview, when he said, I'm giving 45,000 to charity, to the community, I thought I don't know how I feel about him, but as a fighter, he's not the most interesting fighter. I don't think he's ever going to be a champion, but he's another contender to put up against another contender, as it were. Yeah, I think a win over Bryce Mitchell doesn't do any harm for anyone at featherweight.
Fair enough. Going down the card, Kevin Holland gets a TKO win over Alex Oliveira, and Sergey Spivak defeats Greg Hardy at heavyweight. Anything you want to throw on those ones? Kevin Holland is the fun one. Kevin Holland's a cool guy.
I thought you pretty well dominated in that first round by Alex Oliveira. And, we talk about, believe us when we say we haven't got anything against Sam Alvey, but
I mean, maybe you guys speak for yourself.
But, the guy is on a huge loss streak in the UFC and isn't in entertaining fights. Now, Cowboy Oliveira has lost 7 of his last 9.
Yeah.
But he is always in entertaining fights. You do not get a boring Cowboy Oliveira fight. And that's the difference between someone like him and Sam Alvey. I'm comparing it to Sam Alvey just because both of them are on big losses. But there's a difference between being on a big loss and being truly dominated in every fight, and being on a big loss streak and having fun fights. The Shavkat Rakhmonov fight for Cowboy Oliveira, fun fight. I think it was Shavkat's debut. Randy Brown fight, really fun fight. Nico Price, phenomenal fight, that one last time out for Cowboy. And now obviously the Kevin Holland fight, he looked so good in the first round against Kevin Holland, and then was just caught in that second round early. I think he was caught almost still resting after the minute pause in between rounds. And what's next for Cowboy? I hope he doesn't get cut. Yes, he's on a 4-loss streak, but he's fun, and I like to see him. And Kevin Holland, we've maybe got another competitor at welterweight now, but does he get anywhere near that top 5 of welterweight? Absolutely not. We were just talking about Jorge Masvidal. Just go down the top 5. Colby Covington wipes the floor with him. Gilbert Burns, obviously now official to fight Khamzat, wipes the floor with him. Leon Edwards wipes the floor with him. Vicente Luque, Bilal Muhammad, Jorge, Stephen Thompson, Neil Magny, Sean Brady, Chiesa, Khamzat.
Tough division. It's a tough division to get through.
It gets dicey when you get into that top 15, not just for Kevin Holland, but everyone's a killer in there, regardless of whether you're Kevin Holland or anybody competing at 170. It's a tough division to break into.
Kevin Holland is a video game character where all of his stats are speed, and he is fast. Even in his losses to Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori, he cracked both of those guys a couple of times just en route to getting taken down. He didn't have any stats in wrestling or counter wrestling,
sure.
But he is fast. And that's what we saw with the Alex Oliveira. If you blinked, you missed what exactly he landed on him, because he is very quick and a little bit crafty.
I had to watch it back because I didn't fully see, what he actually landed with, because like you say, he's constantly doing that. So he almost stands slightly out of range, and he constantly does that kind of jump in to try and land like a big one too. And obviously this time it landed, and it was a really good knockout, I think. But I don't see him cracking anywhere near the top 10, top 15 of this division, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, with a good few favorable matchups, I think he can make it far, but that's being saying like, we're going to give him a couple of fights that he can style on. But what do you think of anything you want to throw at heavyweights on Sergey Spivak, or just whatever? Who cares?
I just like watching Greg Hardy get knocked out.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. And he's now no longer got a UFC contract. That was his last fight on his contract. He's got three knockout losses in his last 3 fights, two of which have been in the first round. The Greg Hardy experiment is, in my opinion, is done now. It's that, we don't need to see. He comes in overweight. He comes in at 295 to fight week. He just about makes it down to 266 and then puts all that weight back on. He's slow. He's got a big leg kick and he's got a reasonable power. But if you look at the wins that Greg Hardy's got in the UFC, they brought in a guy to face him that had just been cut from the UFC because he had 2 losses. He then went and fought, it's called Aslan Challenge, and then they brought him back to face Greg Hardy. Obviously, he knocked him out. Juan Adams knocked him out. He decisioned Ben Sassoli, but then that was when he took his inhaler between rounds. He then was dominated by Volkov. Defeated Jorgen De Castro. That's actually a win that hasn't aged too badly. That's a win that hasn't aged well at all, because Jorgen De Castro is coming off the big win against Justin Taffa, but then, he's 0-2 since then and been cut. And, he then defeats Maurice Green, who, again, that win hasn't aged well because Maurice Green hasn't won since then. Maurice Green's only win in his last 5 fights has been Jean Vellante. Exactly. And then Marcin Tybura tied to Avas and Sergey Spivak. The experiment of getting a controversial figure in Greg Hardy into the UFC is what it is, but that's it now for me. I don't, I never take much notice in Greg Hardy's fights anyway, because I just think that he's a trash human being. But now that he's been knocked out or finished 3 times in his last 3 fights, and he's no longer officially got a UFC contract, I think that's time we called it. He'll go back. He might fight on the regional scene, but I have no interest in seeing him fight anymore.
Nope, totally co-signed with that. UFC has kind of used him to build up. I think Tai Tuivasa has been the best gainer in terms of what the Greg Hardy experiment did. And I think maybe it paid off, because Tai Tuivasa is a guy that we now talk about. He cracked into the top 3. But yeah, sometimes you get a controversial figure, build him up on a couple of wins, and then he loses to somebody, and then you build up that guy. And I think, Greg Hardy's probably done. But in better news, Marina Rodriguez gets a close, controversial split decision victory against Zhannan. Still a tough division. I want to see Marina Rodriguez really put a stamp on it to really push forward into ahead of this division, because I like Marina. I think she's an extremely good talent and a good comeback story in 2021. What's next for both of these people? Both are incredibly talented. They're both going to be top 10 ranked at women's flyweight. What do you think?
Yeah, I think these are strawweights. The Marina Rodriguez.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, because like you say, you're a fan of Marina Rodriguez. She was my female fighter of the year for last year. 3 victories. She did have that one fight up at flyweight, didn't she, against Michelle Waterson, just on.
It was a short notice.
Short notice main event. Yeah. So.
And neither of them are flyweights. Michelle's definitely not a flyweight.
Far from it. Michelle's a atom weight, just an atom weight outside of the division, because the division doesn't exist in the UFC. So. But, she had the main event against Mackenzie Dern, dominated Mackenzie Dern fairly well. I don't think this Xiaonan win has actually benefited Marina Rodriguez in any way, shape, or form, because
stock didn't rise on this win.
No, not at all. And it was controversial for a start. And Xiaonan must be kicking herself after celebrating with 40 seconds to go and then losing the fight.
Yep.
It's a difficult one to score. I did score it in Marina Rodriguez's favour. Whether that was because I was sort of looking at it through rose-tinted glasses almost. But, she was outlanded in that second round and had less control time. I think the first round is a contentious one. But if you listen to the commentary, the Rogan and Bisping, really thought that Yang Xiaonan was winning that first round. But it doesn't appear, 29-28. So it's obviously the 2-1 scorecard. I'd like to see the actual scorecards of which rounds were scored in favor of Marina Rodriguez, because it's a difficult one. Like I said, I don't think her stock actually rises at all.
No.
So yeah, Marina Rodriguez won the second and third round on two of the cards. The second round was a difficult one to score because she was outlanded strikes wise. Just Yang Xiaonan landed 2 more strikes. They both landed 14 significant strikes, but Yang Xiaonan took Marina Rodriguez that well and was able to control her for a minute and a half. Now that's not an awful lot of time, understandably, but when a fight's that close and you do get some control time, it's did she actually win that fight? You've got to ask the question. But 2 of the judges, Ron McCarthy and Mike Bell, did score that second round in favor of Marina Rodriguez. She definitely did win the last round. She won on all 3 scorecards. It's the stats, but it also suggests that she won it. She landed 41 strikes to Yang Xiaonan's 19. Octagon control, damage, and all that. But I think if you are Yang Xiaonan, you've got to feel slightly hard done by, just because you're coming off the first loss of your career in the UFC.
Yeah.
To Carlos Esparza, that dominating loss, and then you come off a very tough split decision loss against Marina Rodriguez. But I don't think her stock, how we're saying that Marina Rodriguez's stock doesn't rise, I don't think Yang Xiaonan's stock drops an awful lot.
No.
Yang Xiaonan versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk on Jędrzejczyk's return is something that I would be extremely interested in. Yeah. And unfortunately for Marina Rodriguez, now I think that she's probably got to look at getting another win now before she can compete with either Carla Esparza or Rose Namajunas. She's on a 4-fight win streak, but I think she's got to get another win now to really cement that title shot, because that wasn't, getting a title shot off the back of that win is certainly controversial in itself, let alone, the controversy of that win. There is controversy over that win. Getting a title shot off the back of that win would also be extremely controversial.
Yeah. No, it was a well-made fight. It was a well-matched fight. Yan Zhannan needs to work on her counter wrestling. We know from the Carla Esparza fight, and Marina Rodriguez is a good rangy striker. So it was a good matchup on paper. But yeah, like you said, I think Yan Zhannan versus Joanna, that's a really good comeback fight for Joanna, because I think it's very winnable for her as well. Marina Rodriguez,
for sure.
The thing is that you want to convince people, because she's ranked 3rd in that division, and you want to convince people I deserve to be in the top, further into that top 3. I don't know that you deserve, you're not going to. Zhang Weili is who you want to fight next? Come on.
Yeah, I did think it's difficult to, Zhang Weili is.
Yeah.
Do you do an all Chinese main event in Shanghai? Where I think that sells very well, of course, just because of the sort of storyline behind the all Chinese sort of main event. And I think that's a good fight, because you've got Zhang Weili, who's been working on her wrestling a lot more as of late, as we saw against Rose Namajunas in the rematch. Mm-hmm. And Yang Xiaonan, like you said, has got to work on her counter wrestling, as we saw against Carla Esparza. So it's not. I think that fight makes a lot of sense. You got Zhang Weili, who's looking to improve that wrestling game, like we say, and Yang Xiaonan, who's looking to improve that side of her game, the counter wrestling side. So I think the two would match very well together. Yeah. Obviously, both Chinese-based fighters, or Chinese native fighters, both based out of the US at the moment. But that headlines a Shanghai card later on in the year. Whether the UFC are going abroad like that, obviously we know they're going to UFC London in a few weeks, but we haven't heard anything as far as international shows. Australia, China, obviously they go back and forth to Fight Island still, but that's slightly different as far as the sort of COVID rules are concerned. The Fight Island is there specifically for the fights. We haven't seen them. I don't think we've seen a Brazilian card. I don't think we've got a Brazilian card.
No. Nothing
lined
scheduled.
up. Obviously, I can't remember the last time the UFC went to Canada, even. Just
It's been a while.
or even European side, apart from UFC London, which is the sort of they regularly do that. I can't remember. They I know they've been to Hamburg. They obviously went to Gdansk. They haven't got any cards scheduled for overseas, as it were. Especially the Australian card. You got Izzy, Rob Whittaker. You got a massive Australian contingent at the moment,
Yeah.
and nothing scheduled as of yet. So I think maybe, hopefully, later on in the year, sort of October time, we'll see maybe a Shanghai Fight Night like we regularly do. We had the Bisping Gastelum. We had Holly Holm versus Betchka Hare, which is a strange fight to put on in Asia, but it is what it is. Maybe I've never understood that fight, why that fight was a headline in Asia, but hopefully it happens sooner rather than later, because these two women deserve to be headlining in their sort of, I say home, but in their native country.
Yeah, I think that would be an awesome main event. It'd be one for the books, one for the ages, and it'd be very fitting for what they're trying to do overseas. And yeah, like you said, London made sense because I think they owed it to them in that was one of the shows that got canceled just before everything fell apart. And Leon Edwards was supposed to be fighting for a title against Tyron Woodley. How times move so quickly. Brazil was the last one where they did technically overseas, but it was an empty arena in Brazil.
It was the first card, wasn't it, that had the empty arena? Lee versus Charles Oliveira, and we know how that sort of benefited Charles Oliveira in a way.
This has been a weird 2 years, hasn't it? This has been something else. But yeah, then we were Performance Institute and Fight Island for that time, and Fight Island's pretty great as well. Okay, so we need to look at next week's card, but I'm pretty sure that neither of us really care about this card. UFC's really struggled in fight nights in 2022 of having any strength on any of these fight nights.
Yeah, for sure.
Thiago Santos versus Magomed Ankalaev. He spends most of his time beating up Ion Cutelaba, and then when he's not fighting Ion Cutelaba, I wouldn't even recognize him outside of beating up. No, he is a Mr. Violence. He's a Team All Violence alumni. I like Magomed Ankalaev a lot. Thiago Santos varies a lot in what we're going to see out of him. A guy with no knees, but still fights very well. I don't know. What do you think of this matchup? I can't see. I mean, this is a Magomed fight. It has to be. Right?
Yeah, it's for me, Magomed Ankalaev, future champion. I think he's absolutely phenomenal. I was there for his only loss against Scotland's Paul Craig, of course. Dominated Paul Craig for 14 minutes and 58 seconds until Paul Craig locked in a triangle and made him tap in the last second of the fight.
Paul Craig lives like down the block from me, and I'm willing to say that guy's not a good fighter.
I think that fight is, like you said, I think it's an Ankalaev fight all day. And then he moves on to become yet another contender in the light heavyweight division. We got the news this week that the Glover Teixeira versus Yuri Prochazka fight has been put back a few weeks.
I mean, Singapore, UFC 275, right?
Oh, so there you go. That's maybe where we've just been talking about no international cards. But
we should have connected the two in my head.
Yeah, UFC 275. At the moment, it says TB location to be determined, but
Singapore is what I heard. I think Ariel reported Singapore,
I've read that online as well. So there you go. But obviously that fight's been. But then with Ankalaev, what did you do after he's number 6? If he beats number 5, Anthony Smith, Alexander Rakic. Rakic is obviously supposed to be facing Jan Blachowicz. That fight got cancelled a few times, I believe. And then what do you do with an Anthony Smith fight? Perhaps maybe that makes sense, but I don't quite know what you do with Ankalaev unless it's a title shot. For me, it's either a title shot or the Anthony Smith fight, because there's nothing else in the division at the moment. He's not going to fight down. He's not going to fight Dominic Reyes. He's already beaten Volkan Ozdemir, already beaten Nikita Krylov. Jamahala Hill it's too dangerous a fight for him to take, to be honest.
Yeah. Not bad.
Co-main event of this card, Marlon Moraes, the best 2-minute fighter in the UFC,
Yes, it's true.
facing Song Yadong, who I thought coming off that impressive win against Julio Arce last time out.
Song is quite good. Song is a good fighter.
It's a rough fight for Marlon Moraes,
Yeah.
He's 1-4 in his last 4. He's been TKO'd in all 4 of those losses against Cejudo, bounced back against Aldo that he didn't win. If you remember that fight, he didn't win that fight.
Yeah.
But officially he got the split decision. He then spinning wheel kick against Corey Sandhagen, the disappointing knockout loss to Rob Font, and then that crazy fight against Merab Dvalishvili, where he knocked Merab out about 4 or 5 times before Merab managed to rally and knock him out.
Love Marlon Moraes. This guy is kill or be killed.
Exactly. He's entertaining fighter. He holds a win over the current champion Aljamain Sterling, but
yeah,
I think the Song Yadong fight, if he loses this, I think he's another one for Bellator, and that I don't think that's he's former PFL champion or World Series of Fighting at the time, long time World Series of Fighting champion, and then I think he tried his hand in the UFC, hasn't really strictly gone his way. He fought for the title, but I think Bellator would probably be the way to go for him because they've got that bantamweight tournament coming up, and I think he'd make it for a very good alternative in that bantamweight tournament. Even if he wins this fight, I think he'd still make a good alternative for that bantamweight tournament.
Well, yeah, the thing is with testing
elsewhere on the card,
yeah. Well, testing free agency, like, I do encourage fighters test free agency every once in a while. You might be surprised by your value. Guys like Kevin Lee and Corey Anderson weren't assets in the UFC. They're making good money now. Anyway, but yeah, moving forward, Sadiq Youssef.
Yeah, so we sort of spoke about Sadiq Youssef, Alex Caceres card. I think Sadiq Youssef is coming off a few. He was the guy, wasn't he? Featherweight, the sort of the heavy hitter, but then he lost to Arnold Allen, was dominated by Arnold Allen last time out. And Alex Caceres is on a sneaky win streak. He's 5-0 in his last 5, and his last loss came against Krohn Gracie. Where's Krohn Gracie gone? We haven't seen him, I think, since he lost to Cub Swanson back in 2019. Yeah, we haven't seen him, and we haven't even heard of anything.
Nope, nothing.
But Alex Caceres, fun fighter, because he always looks like he's going to get knocked out, and then he pulled off a rear naked choke. But elsewhere on the card, I think that the highlights for me: Drew Dober versus Terence McKinney.
That's a great fight.
McKinney's taking this on a little over a week's notice, which is fair play, but it's Drew Dober's no mug, Drew Dober is, I don't know. I think it's for Drew Dober, I think it's extremely risky. For Terence McKinney, I think it's extremely risky. He's got the hype now. He's got 2 wins inside. He's got the 7-second knockout and the win 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's a tough fight, but if he gets a win over Drew Dober, it is what it is. And then obviously we've got Alex Pereira opening up the main card back again, the kickboxing sensation against Bruno Silva. And Bruno Silva, if you remember his last fight against Jordan Wright, it was carnage for as long as it lasted. I think it went under a round, I believe. Yeah, so 1 minute 28 seconds performance of the night. He got performance of the night against Andrew Sanchez, and he's 3-0 in the UFC with 3 knockouts. Alex Ferreira's got to mind his P's and Q's against Bruno Silva because that could be the hype over if he loses against Bruno Silva in just his second UFC fight, especially if he's knocked out.
Yeah, it honestly could be. And it's a good matchup for Pereira in that he's not fighting a wrestler. They're really trying to navigate carefully with Pereira here. See how fast we can get him to a title shot without facing Derek Brunson. But yeah, so Bruno Silva, who else do you see on the card upcoming?
Just the two women's fights, I think, are both interesting. JJ Elderich versus Jillian Robertson. I've spoke to Jillian Robertson a number of times. Really like her as a fighter. I think she's very switched on as a fighter. She's got some big wins, but she's also got some disappointing losses. The Talia Santos loss was a tough loss for her, as was the Miranda Maverick loss. But with her wins, she seems to she's a finisher. She finished Courtney Casey. Yes, she went the distance with Poliana Bathello. She finished Priscilla Cachoeira last time out. She finished Veronica Marcelo. She was TKO by Macy Barber, but she finished Molly McCann. So, she's a finisher, and JJ Alderich is no slouch either. I think Alderich was ever so slightly thrown to the wolves when she faced Macy Barber. She also lost to Sabina Mazo, but, she beat Courtney Casey and she beat Vanessa Demopoulos, which is, that win has aged really quite well.
It has.
And, Sabina Mazo is also on the card, as we mentioned earlier. She's coming off that very disappointing loss to Maria Agapova, but she faces Miranda Maverick, who herself is coming off. She started 2-0 in the UFC, and she was the next big thing. But since then, she lost to Macy Barber, which was a tough, controversial decision, and she was pretty well dominated by Erin Blanchfield last time out. Miranda Maverick really needs this win because she was on a 5-fight win streak, including the TKO in a UFC debut, then the win against Jillian Robertson. But having picked up 2 losses, she really needs to get the win against Sabina Mazo, and I think it's a good stylistic matchup for her. I think she'll probably just overwhelm Mazo with her wrestling game, and I think it'll probably be enough for Maverick to kick on now, get that victory, and then have a much stronger 2022 than she did 2021, because obviously picking up the 2 losses in 2021 didn't do Maverick stock. She went 1-2 in 2021. It didn't quite do Maverick stock too well, to be honest.
No, it didn't. You skipped over the Mr. 50-50 fight. You got Khalil Roundtree Jr. versus Carl Robertson. The Mr. 50-50 versus Mr. 50-50.
Yeah, I like Khalil Roundtree. He's a fun guy.
I do.
He's a fun fighter.
Just
especially when he completely changed his style up, didn't he? He went from
a banger to a Thai
banger
fighter.
to a straight up Muay Thai fighter with some of the best leg kicks in the game.
Yeah.
And I like Leo Roundtree. I think he's good, but
so
what does this fight do? Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where I'll certainly tune in for it, because Carl Roberson's a fun fighter to watch, as is Khalil Roundtree. Don't really know what this fight does for either man's career, but Khalil Roundtree was definitely talking about hanging up the gloves the last time out.
That's what I remember too.
Yeah. So I think he probably, a loss maybe might see the end of Khalil Roundtree. A win would, there's also the potential that it'll see the end of Khalil Roundtree. So we'll have to see with that one how it plays out. I think depends on how Khalil Roundtree, or whether we'll see Khalil Roundtree again.
Yep, absolutely co-sign with you. So we broke down last week's card at length. We broke down next week's card, which is kind of a weak one. We will be back at some point in the future. We'll be back at some point in the future due to various announcements and such like that, due to various successes, if you will. Anything you want to say before we head out of here?
Yeah, no, I think like Tim's just alluded to there, I think we're going to be stepping slightly back from the regular week in, week out podcast like we've provided for the past however many weeks. But we are in discussion at the moment about looking to do, sort of like at least one podcast a month, with looking at the pay-per-view. So if as we know, pay-per-views tend to fall one a month, sometimes 2 a month, one at the end, one at the beginning. So we'll look to still do the podcast at least. We'll provide you with an hour-long podcast for. And most importantly, bear with us as well, because we record the pay-per-views. Record the podcasts.
Yeah.
Maybe a week earlier, we might bulk record some of the podcasts. So if this week if we go in depth on a Rafael Fiziev versus Rafael dos Anjos fight, and then on fight week it gets cancelled, just bear with us for now, because we'll be like I say, we like Tim alluded to as well, we both got other projects that may take a little bit of time. So we're going to definitely, we don't want to completely give up the podcast, because it's something that we've built ourselves quite, obviously I'd like to think you guys think as well that we have quite a good sort of relationship as far as the podcast is concerned, you know. So it's important not to just drop that completely, but yeah, just bear with us for now, and we'll be updating you on social media and whatnot as to, you know, schedule for the podcast. And yeah, it's fun weekend of fights last weekend, fun weekend of fights this weekend, and it's the kind of thing that me and Tim like to break down. So yeah, bear with us, but we'll be a little bit more inconsistent than we have been, but we won't go away completely. So don't worry about that.
Sucks being in demand and suffering from success over here. That's
exactly
all it is. All right, folks. Cheers. We'll get out of here for now.
Take it easy. Cheers.